in principle, I think the word is principle because he deals with things that are beyond us. In that sense, I mean that in physical science you have laws, like the law of gravity and the law of thermodynamics, etc., etc. We all learned that in physics in school. But there are other laws in the world of art, particularly acting, and they are called principles. So I think Chekhov actually talks about those principles, how to connect to them and how to tap into them, so then your acting becomes much easier. It's no longer sort of struggling inwardly, trying to get things from inside and bringing them up to express an emotion or something like that from your past experience. But you tap into these principles which are there, like the principle of gravity, of course. That's very easy to understand. And we know gravity is there when you're tired, you can't get up, so you feel that, in fact, what do? You've got to lift this body. Now, if you imagine, of course, that there is something pulling you up, you come into levity, but then the gravity takes you right down into the ground, so you're able then to base yourself, have a foundation, and begin to really work with that principle of gravity as pure movement, as opposed to coloring the movement, because then we get into an emotion or a feeling. So there are these archetypal principles, or pure movement principles, I like to call them. And in that sense, I don't think any other approach to acting or any other technique allows the actor to be so free and to be so able to control their performance by tapping into these principles. You have to experience them, and that's what the exercises are all about. Otherwise we wouldn't need exercises. We would just have concepts and immediately we have an experience or a percept. You would perceive it immediately and therefore experience it. So all the exercises are really about coming from concept or the knowledge of something to an experience, because knowledge and experience are quite two different things, in my opinion. And particularly for the actor, you can understand something, you can write a thesis about something, you can have a degree in acting about something, be very academic, but have you experienced it, and can you do it? That's the main thing. It's like someone wanting to play the piano, and they've never touched the piano, but they can give you great lectures on the theory of the piano, the history of the piano, or the great pianists, etc., etc. But can they play the piano? No. That's the difference that we need, really, for the actor. You've got to experience these things, experience them, practice them, and then they become a technique, or you've built the muscle for that. So in that sense, there's many principles there which you've got to experience, and you can only experience them by doing the exercises which lead you to the experience and the knowledge, and then you can trust them. They're always there for you, and you'll always develop a relationship with them. The more you practice, the better the relationship. Like in life, the more you meet people that you really like and want to have a relationship, the more you meet them, the more you see them, if it's a relationship that's really based on soundness and just not on superficiality, like socializing, for example. The more that you see them, the more you get to know them, and the more that relationship is developed. And it's a two-way street. I have this expression, it takes two to tango. So there's you and the principle. You develop a relationship, and if you want to talk about a particular method, it's like a dance in a way with that principle. So what are the principles? We've talked about gravity, levity, and they're based on the 6 directions of space, meaning your position in space, where you are, like your position in with your Apple or iPhone, you know, it says what's your location and it tells you where you are. That's the most important thing with the 6 directions. And you move them then. You actually go into the first direction, there are key words for that, the back direction, up, levity, down, gravity, and right and left. And when you begin to practice those, and use the key words to experience them, they are wonderful principles to tap into. Then we also have the principle of out and in, expansion and contraction, and Chekhov talks about that as well. And he even talks about working with these contrasts or opposites, like the opposite of out and in, for example. That's terribly, terribly important. There's also great other opposites there as well. You can go on all day possibly talking about them. Well, not talking about them, defining them, like light and darkness, day and light, winter and summer, and so on. You can work with those if you develop then the spatial sense, and that spatial sense is about movement. Everything is based on movement. So, for example, if you think of expansion, you have to expand your arms. Not only your arms, but your whole face and your eyes and your mouth as well. If we talk about contraction or coming in, you feel and sense the air, that you've built up a relationship with the molding, floating, flying, and radiating. By the way, I prefer not for floating, because that gets a little bit vague. I prefer supporting. The air will support you. And for flying, I prefer impulse, that you move out of an impulse, which comes from the air, like a great wind pushing you down the street, or blowing a piece of paper along the road. So with those four basic elements that you've practiced, you begin to develop a sense of you moving the space. Now we can call it space and not air. You moving the space, so you actually push it out. Or the space can pull you out. So now you're not doing it, but the space is drawing you out, as opposed to you initiating it, you doing it. And the same with in. The space can push you in. Or the space can, or you can bring the space in to you. Very different. So they're just some of the principles. If we look at the principle, and then with space, of course, then you've got atmosphere. Then you've got inner space, which is feeling. And the key words, sensation and sense. Sensation for inner feelings, and sensing for creating atmospheres. When you talk about atmospheres for acting, for actors, they immediately begin to act the situation, at the atmosphere, whether it's scared. Oh my goodness, oh I'm scared. Or shh, shh, shh. Now that creates something, of course, but it's not just you doing it. The atmosphere is outside you, in the space, in the air, in number 3. And it's how you create that is most important. And you need an ensemble to create that. Of course, it's created by lighting and scenery and all those other things, and music as well. But it's certainly something that the actor has to learn these. I don't like the word techniques. I don't know why. Approach, yeah. You know, approach is really about how you come to something. You know, how I approach someone, how they approach me. That's very different from technique or method. So I really prefer the word approach rather than technique. I think technique is rather like a machine. That's why approach always works better for me.